Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Sunday. Thank you for being here. Today is going to be a day where we're going to be using these headphones a lot. There's going to be a lot of various sound examples that we're playing today. We're talking about primordial sounds, and they'll take a little definition of what I mean by that. I developed that system, sort of stumbled on the concept by accident back in the late 80s. I think 1986 was my first album, and I already was toying with that concept, but it didn't really reach an official birth until 1988 when I sold my practice in Virginia and my house in Virginia. I'd been in practice as a holistic physician in the largest holistic health center in Virginia for, I think I was there for 8 years. I started practice in 1980, and that was a giant practice, very well-oiled machine with full-time front desk person, an insurance billing person, and 2 doctors, me and another guy, and we each had RN nurses following us around. We really had our act together. We were doing all kinds of different holistic forms, of various forms of chiropractic, cranial sacral work, meridian therapy. We weren't using needles. I was using magnetic stimulation. We were the first clinic in the country to have a laser acupuncture machine. The first clinic on the East Coast, not the country. Made the newspapers, and we had a whole area in the back for doing biomagnetic therapy. We had a $10,000 device for shaping and magnetic fields on different parts of the body. We had a full functioning blood lab in the back for doing nutrition studies based on your blood. We really were doing all the cutting edge stuff back in the early 80s. And it was in that context I started exploring the use of sound and working on my first album as a composer and a musician. And those 2 parallel tracks were setting the stage for the phenomenal results that I was getting in my clinic with the use of sound influencing organs and different body parts and the meridians and finally the brain. And when I got to the point with the brain, it was such a crazy, fantastic idea, and I could see that the sound was outpacing all the other therapies I was doing in this clinic together, that it was more powerful than everything else I was using, that I realized that I should be doing this full time. And I couldn't do it in Virginia because it was too regressive, too conservative and regressive. And this was an ultimate progressive idea. And I moved to California. I sold my practice, sold my house, had a big bundle of money, went to California, set up a huge center, and got a lot of press and a lot of news, a lot of fame. And by that time, I say my first album came out in 1986. And in 1988, I set up a studio in my spare room and started pumping out more albums. So I had 25 albums by 1990 when I first met the relaxation company, and that was my ticket to mainstream stores with my own bin card, Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, and my CDs in their own spot. And so when we're talking about this concept of primordial sounds, I'm talking about sounds that are primordially recognizable to the deepest part of the unconscious mind, so that anyone who would hear these special types of sounds would have the same experience, no matter what language you speak or what culture you come from, or what age you are, what sex you are. It would have sort of an objective response under the hood. And so, if we're going to talk, and by the way, today is a day this is a Jangir dancer mask from Indonesia. And the dances they do are these sacred dances to sacred music. So I think this is a good goddess to use when we talk about the primordial effect of sounds on the psyche and on the unconscious mind. It's powerful indeed, what we're about to get into. And if we're going to talk about sound, we really have to start at the beginning, the master of sound, Pythagoras. No talk about a primordial nature of sound would be complete without mentioning Pythagoras, who discovered the sort of geometry and mathematics of music, that his sacred monochord with a single string, and the open string is a certain note. Exactly halfway along the string is one octave of each short string. So here we can kind of see it, where the open string is a certain note, and if you divide it exactly in half, it's still C. Each of these two strings here now is C an octave higher. So if the open string all across is 200 hertz, and you put your finger on the string here and you pluck either of these two strings, each of those is 400 hertz, one octave higher. And by the geometry of measuring the string at different lengths, we create a harmonic third, fourth, fifth, sixth, harmonic sevenths. They all lay out on a linear line where we have, perfect fifths and perfect fourth and a minor third and a major second. All of these things spin out the basic laws of music theory that all of music, particularly in the Western world, has come from. The dynamic nature of the mathematical relationship between different vibrations of different frequencies coming together and mixing together mathematically, where the wave of one mixes with the wave of another and they all fit nicely together and pack nicely. That's a harmony. That's a harmonious chord. It's a harmonious relationship. Which makes harmonies, which sound pleasing, and to which our musical instruments are tuned, like the grand piano behind me. He carried this one step further into recognizing that the basic laws of music, the geometry mathematics of music, extended beyond music itself. Pretty much the conversation I had, last week, where we're grappling with the fact that English doesn't really have a word to describe the sonic universe. We only have a word to describe of vibrational frequencies between 20 and 20,000 hertz. We call that sound. And once it goes below 20 hertz, we feel it as vibration, but we don't really have I guess you can call it infrasound. But above 20,000 hertz, there's no word for it. But those frequencies are there, and they go forever higher and more rapid, and they get forever slower and less rapid at the other end, to a point where they get so slow that the waveform is 100 million light years peak to peak, and they call that a gravity wave. And the reason, and because you've named it something different, you think that it's a different thing, but in reality, it's sound. It's pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency, even though the frequency might be so slow from our standpoint that it's one wave crest 100 million years. So it's sort of this kind of conundrum when we talk about the second major force of the universe, electromagnetism and sound forming the big yin-yang of what makes everything what it is. But when Pythagoras started extending the harmonics and overtones of music theory into the orbital diameters of planets in our solar system and saw something similar going on there, and then as time went on, more and more and more discoveries started to be made about the basic mathematics of harmonic and intervals and overtones and octaves, forming all kinds of different geometric patterns that we see representative in nature. Particularly Fibonacci spiral forms, the golden section ratio, or the harmonic fifth, chambered nautilus, galactic spirals, the spirals of DNA, all the cochlea of the inner ear. All of these kind of waveforms are mathematical forms, representative music theory, frozen in matter. This concept of a certain type of spiral that spins automatically from this math that we see represented over and over and over again in all kinds of different forms in nature. The spinning of a Fibonacci series, spinning in circles, forms all kinds of other patterns that spin from that, particularly patterns of 5, which sort of explains in one way the mystery of the structure of my body, right? I'm basically a star, right? I've got the head and I've got 2 arms and 2 legs. I spread my legs out. I'm forming a star, the Vitruvian man. I've got 5 fingers and 5 toes, and it's mirror image right and left, sort of reiterating the idea of the yin and yang. There's always 2 things. There's always 2 sides of a coin. There's always positive and negative. There's always matter and antimatter. It's reiterated everywhere. It's right under your nose. It's every place you look. The universe is just, it's in your face everywhere. Most of us aren't looking. Harmonic patterns in nature, the first step in understanding harmonic resonance patterns is to study cymatic patterns of vibrating sand or vibrating water with sound frequencies going through it. And every different sound frequency forms a different pattern. And the patterns that are formed obey the same laws that we see that Pythagoras was putting forth in harmonic resonance. Each pattern is the result of specific harmonic frequencies reflected inside a container. For instance, a pentagonal geometry is formed either by one frequency resonating at the 4th wave partial of the prime resonance frequency, a harmonic 4th, in other words, or 2 frequencies forming an interval such as the perfect 5th. In both cases, we simply add the 2 sides of the harmonic proportion to find the shape of geometry. It's the shape of the intracellular, extracellular fluid in your body. It's everywhere. It's everything formed by these harmonic patterns. Neural resonance. Holonomic brain theory. Cognitive function is guided by a matrix of neurological wave interference patterns. Harmonic resonance theory, in the brain, how the brain functions. Spatial patterns in perception and behavior are mediated by spatial standing waves in neurotissue. That means that we've got these kind of patterns of standing waves in a resonance characteristic in neural activity and how the neurons fire in your brain, forming patterns. And that is closely aligned with consciousness itself. And then we've got these patterns form 5 basic Platonic solids. Platonic because it was discovered by Plato and wrote a paper about it and made illustrations of the 5 basic geometric shapes that form all things. Because the whole periodic table, all of the atoms in the periodic table, each atom has its foundation as one of these shapes. And by arranging the atoms according to the foundational geometric shape that it's built on, you can arrange the periodic table in a different way. These represent the basic building blocks that make up our world. These shapes appear throughout nature, from crystals to human DNA. The periodic table, based on the geometric shapes that are the foundation of each of the elements of the periodic table, show clear progressions of the 5 Platonic solids as the foundation of reality itself. And then these atoms form together and form compounds, which are atoms arranged in a 3-dimensional shape that form a compound. And that 3-dimensional shape also falls into the same mathematical geometry that we see on the tuning of that piano right back there. Harmonics, overtones, octaves. We see this arranged in how the periodic table follows larger mathematical patterns of octaves, where we have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th octave, and various elements of the periodic table in each of these octave arrangements, that all of them are related harmonically to each other based on the same mathematics we see in music theory. Each of these nodes on this line is one of the noble gases. And the 7 noble gases track with the 7 chakras. It's one of the projects I've got on my shelf to pull off soon when I complete the sounds of the elements of the periodic table. And the first ones I'm going to do will be the 7 noble gases. The reason they're called noble gases is because all of the elements in the periodic table have protons and neutrons in the center. Proton is a positive charge, neutron is negative, is 0. So that's the nucleus. And then we've got the electron cloud, where the electron is orbiting around that, and that's a negative charge. There are 3 harmonic shells. They call them shells. They're spherical and they're ripple patterns. So if you would think of a still pool of water and you drop a pebble in, you'll see these bumpy ripple patterns coming out in a circle. And we imagine that instead of a 2-dimensional circle on a pond, that the pond is 3D and it's spherical ripples coming out. And we have 3 spherical ripples frozen in space-time around each atomic nucleus. So the electrons orbit around in a cloud of probability according to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, which we've discussed before. But for those of you who are fuzzy on this topic, it basically says that you can't measure the speed of something and its location at the same time. You can either know where it is or you can know how fast it's going, but you can't know both. So when in high school we learned that it looks like a sun with an orbiting planet around it, that this electron looks like it's orbiting around. It is indeed doing that, but its position as it orbits around is every possible position you could think of and imagine. And it's going so fast that it actually forms an electron cloud. So now you've got the nucleus with this sort of foggy cloud around it of the possible positions of this electron spinning and forming everything it could be. And you can't know its actual position. You can know all of its probable positions, which is sort of everywhere. That's why it looks like a cloud. And if you wanted to find out its exact location, you'd have to freeze frame this thing and take a photo and stop it. And then you would see the cloud disappears and the electron would be in this position where you captured that photo. Now you could tell its position at this particular moment in time. But the next moment from now, it wouldn't be there anymore. It would keep moving on. Once you stop the freeze frame, you can't tell where it is, but you can see how fast it's going by measuring the speed inside this cloud. That kind of thing. And each of these shells, these three shells, is supposed to have a certain number of electrons that fills that shell. And if that shell gets filled with electrons, then they spill out into the next shell and start filling it up. And when that one's full, they spill out into the third shell and start filling that up. And the closer the shell is to the center, the more stable the atom, and the more electrons pile up and start filling up the outer shell, it starts to get very complex and very unstable. That's the kind of configuration you see in plutonium and uranium and things like that that are radioactive. And none of the atoms in the periodic table, except the noble gases, none of the other elements of the periodic table have a stable configuration. In other words, the number of electrons in the three shells is supposed to equal exactly the number of protons in the nucleus. So the number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus should always equal to be the same number of electrons in the outer shells. Now we have a stable configuration. But that's not the case in any of the atoms in the periodic table except the noble gases. The noble gases are the perfect ones, the enlightened ones, the ones who have a perfect stable configuration. The envy of all the atoms in the periodic table, these are the enlightened ones, the masters, the sages, who've reached a perfect place of still perfection, where the number of protons and neutrons exactly equal the number of electrons in the shells. They're all perfectly filled. And those atoms are called inert. They have no desire to mix with any other atom because the other atoms are constantly seeking to maximize the perfect number of electrons in their shells to complete themselves and achieve a stable configuration like the noble ones. And the only way they can do it is to get married with another atom, right? So that's why iron that has, 7 electrons in the outer shell and it needs to have 8 combines with oxygen that has 1 in its outer shell and it needs 7. And so the two of them get married and now they've both got 8 in their outer shells where those shells overlap and we have ferric oxide. And that is the driving force behind all the compounds that exist in the universe, is this propensity of the electrons coming together in all kinds of infinite ways to complete their outer shells. And it can be more than just 2. It can be 5, it can be 10, it can be 20, that all kind of configure themselves together to form all kinds of very complex compounds that make everything that we are. All of it at its root based on the 5 platonic solids, which form themselves based on the harmonic overtone and octave patterns based on music theory as per Pythagoras. And each of these things that I'm talking about, for instance, these 5 platonic solids, when you see these 5 platonic solids here, and you see these various shapes, particularly if I could rotate these in 3-dimensional space so you could really see what they look like as a 3-dimensional solid, there's something about these shapes that is deeply recognizable to the deepest part of your unconscious mind, the part of your collective unconscious mind that built you out of scratch, that at a quantum field assembled vibrating standing waves from the core of the quantum field, assembled them together in such a state of complexity based on all these harmonics and overtones and octave mathematics and geometries, that the end result is it looks like a body, it looks like me, it looks like a thing, it looks like a book, looks like a wall. So, you know, showing the harmonic waveform which creates an atom of matter and antimatter. You know, it's like harmonic radii of electron orbits. It's pretty mind-blowing sort of stuff. The origin of the shell model, the shells where the electrons form. Harmonic oscillator with spin orbit is a reasonable approximation of the nuclear mean field. We're not going to get into all this advanced math, which I have no idea. It's way over my head, but I recognize the basic tenets of what's being discussed here, that harmonic oscillators that resonate at harmonic overtone octave patterns forms the basis of everything. Harmonic principles of elementary crystals, from atomic interaction to fundamental symmetry. This is deep stuff that's clearly established in physics of today, in quantum physics. When we're talking about the elements of the periodic table and the electrons in the shells, these electrons in the shells, atoms are extremely dynamic structures. There is a huge amount of energy and resonance and spin and movement going on in an atom. It's a highly energetic thing. And the electrons are unbelievably fast, spinning around and jumping in and out of shells. Their energy ramps up and they jump out of this shell into the next higher energy shell. And they might absorb more energy and jump into a higher shell, and then they lose that energy and they jump back down. And every time they make one of those jumps from one shell to the other, which is on this constant basis, it releases a huge amount of energy in the form of angstrom frequencies, which is the range of the periodic table, the range of the electromagnetic spectrum that is color. 400 to 750 nanometers is the frequencies that burst out from the electron every time it moves in one of these shells, because the whole system is so dynamic and energetic. And when it does that, it creates these, stable color lines, and where each one of these color lines is a highly precise angstrom frequency color, accurate to 10 decimal points. And these color line sequences for each element is absolutely stable, like a fingerprint. So stable that you can do a spectral analysis of a distant nebula in the universe and do a spectral analysis and pick apart what elements make up the cloud. So it was my task, I think I discovered this, discussed this before, was to take each one of these angstrom frequency colors and do a mathematical conversion and drop it 43 octaves and generate it as a sine wave sound tone. And there's 250 color lines in oxygen. And so when I first created the sound of oxygen by converting 250 color lines into 250 tracks in my recording studio, and each track had a sine wave that kept the 10-point accuracy of resonance. And each of these color lines has a certain brightness, so the brightness got converted to loudness. And that became a project that I'm still working on. The first two of these elements that I produced, oxygen and gold, I will be releasing soon, so you can hear those. They have a physical effect. We did a double-blind study with 40 volunteers at the California Institute for Human Science. It was a student's project. And we laid people on their back, and we took their heart rate and respiration and blood pressure to make sure that they had reached baseline, which means the lowest heart rate, respiration, and blood pressure. And then we put a pulse oximeter on their fingertip, which measures the oxygen levels in the capillary beds, and it also measures heart rate. So we could calibrate heart rate from this device to heart rate on our heart rate variability monitor. And then we played the sound of elemental oxygen through the sound table into their body. And we could see that we could raise the oxygen level in their blood with the sound of elemental oxygen. Not in 100% of the people. And so the mystery is still, why did some of those people not have their oxygen raised and other ones did? But the fact that some did is a mind blower anyway. But since it's all vibration, so if it's light vibration or electromagnetic vibration or sound vibration, vibration is vibration is vibration, and it's all linked by octaves. So any octave, that should work. And so we just set the experiment up and it does work. So that means oxygen could potentially be good for circulatory disorders, diabetic neuropathy, anything that you might take yourself to a hyperbaric oxygen chamber for. This would be good for. We have, so you can see that each one of these elements is a different color arrangement of its color frequencies. Neon is one of the noble gases, by the way. I thought it might be interesting to hear the sound of oxygen. So here's our first little foray into using headphones. So I'll give you a chance to get your headphones on. And I'm going to play a minute of the sound of elemental oxygen. So here we go. I don't know about you, but it sure sounds like a heartbeat to me in there. Boom, 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 boom. So for us, that was like a big mind blow. We're all sitting around listening. The first time I did the mix down and pressed the play button for the first time to hear it for the first time, and it's got a heartbeat in the sound of elemental oxygen. We're all freaking out because that just can't be right. And then we realized that's exactly right. That's exactly how the universe works. That what does the heart do? It pumps oxygen around in the blood. And the oxygen, when you play it as a sound, has a heartbeat. So the two of those nest together, and it's like this perfect kind of mind blower. It's poetic. It's the way the universe does things. But, all the way down to the structure and the geometry of the harmonic sequence of the arrangement of the DNA itself, right? That makes everything of who you are. The 4 pairs of proteins that form the basic structures of the DNA. It's the letters of the alphabet of DNA. All of that based on the same sort of deeply recognizable primordial mathematic structures of harmonics, overtones, and octaves that we see in structures everywhere. So with that as sort of a basis, we can start to graduate ourselves into taking on the sound portion of this universal expression of deeply recognizable primordial imagery in the geometry of nature, in the mathematics and geometry of the elements of the periodic table and the compounds that they form, which forms you and me and everything else. So it means that if we were, the more aware that we get of these kind of ideas, the more we're struck by what we see all around us, particularly in nature, that exemplifies these mathematical principles right in your face. It's every leaf and every flower and every structure you see in nature exemplifies these mathematical harmonic overtone principles. And so if you go back to the root of where it all comes from, the best expression that we know of this principle, which is sound, and the relationship of sound as vibrations relating mathematically and geometrically together to form music theory, now we're starting to get somewhere. Now, the most sort of primordial recognizable sound that I can think of would be womb sounds. And at 16 to 24 weeks, brain development has happened to a point where all 5 senses come online for the first time in your life. And remember that you're small. You're no bigger than the length of the heel of your hand to your fingertips, and you're floating in amniotic fluid, body temperature water. You're floating weightless in body temperature water like a float tank. And your senses all come online, but you're in the dark, so your eyes aren't collecting anything. Nose and mouth are filled with fluids, so you're not smelling or tasting anything. But sound travels through water 5 times better than it does through air. So actually the only experience we have is a sound and a vibration sense experience of sound waves amplifying through the water and activating that one single sense. So those 2 senses, hearing, vibration sense, are 2 different senses. So we're sort of baptized in sound for 9 months, all of us. And so our experiences of what we heard in the womb from the standpoint of a fetus is very different than being an adult out here listening with a stethoscope up against a mother's belly. And I went through a process of recreating that as sort of a sound engineer and a scientist. And as a sound engineer, I wanted it to be as perfect as possible. So I'm placing all the different sounds in the correct 3-dimensional positions. As a physician, I know my anatomy really well. So I know exactly, if I was, like this small and I'm floating, what would it sound like to me? I'd be underwater, so I'd hear underwater kind of sounds. I would hear respiratory sounds of my mother because the diaphragm is right up here. I would hear heartbeat sounds from my mother. I would hear a heartbeat pulse in my belly through the umbilical cord, a thumping that I could feel physically as a vibration. Mother's vocalization sounds resonating through her body. I would hear the gloopy bloopy sounds of the large and small intestines, which are kind of all around me. And that sort of matrix of sound has one final element that's missing unless you're a sound engineer. And that's the fact that my perception of pitch, whether a sound is very low sound or a very high sound, low sounds have slow waves and high sounds have rapid waves, is all related to the diameter of my eardrum. So if my eardrum is, this big, and I have a sound wave that's the same diameter, I perceive that as a certain pitch. And if I have a big wave that hits my eardrum, I perceive that as a low pitch. But if my eardrum was 6 feet in diameter, that same low pitch for the small eardrum would seem to be a high pitch to a bigger eardrum, right? And we have the reverse of that in the womb. We have a fetus whose ear is, a sort of extremely small, where the ear is very, very small, and the eardrum is microscopic. And so now the kind of sound waves that we hear that sound like sort of regular mid-range sounds would be deep and slow and monstrous sounds to a teeny, teeny, tiny little microscopic eardrum. So really, the whole sound architecture I made together of the womb sounds all had to be dropped by a few octaves to make up for the fact that the eardrum of the fetus is smaller, and it would sound to a fetus different than what it sounds to an adult with a stethoscope. And so here's a sample of that. So let's put our headphones back on. Primordial sounds. The original sound that you ever heard is the same for everybody. So that's an example of an objective sound that would have the same effect on anybody who heard it, because we all had the same experience for 9 months in the womb, bathed in sound and vibration. Crazy, eh? Got to be careful. So that would be an example of what I call primordial sounds, the deepest that I can think of. The very first sound you ever heard was the soundtrack to the first months of your life. And at 16 to 24 weeks, that's 24 weeks is 7. Let's see, how many weeks in a month? 4. So it's like a few months. It's like you've still got a few months to go, a few months to go of listening to the soundtrack and feeling the soundtrack. Secondary primordial sounds would be something like that would come, say, in nature, sounds that are familiar to all of us. It wouldn't be quite as complete as womb sounds. That goes cross-culture, cross-language, any place in the world. Nature sounds would be a little bit different. Like, for instance, for most of us, the sounds of nature in a wood, in woods with birds and streams and maybe rain or waterfall, or ocean sounds, or that kind of thing. That would be for the majority of us, but it wouldn't be for a Bedouin who lives in the desert, in the Sahara, or the Mojave. Ocean sounds wouldn't be it for them. It would be wind sounds. It would be different kinds of sounds that are primordial for them. But for all intents and purposes, we can take rainforest and wooded areas and birds and streams and water and ocean as a secondary primordial sound. The thing about what I stumbled on was because of my experience with what I had to do with the womb sounds, that there was a critical element missing that was taking into account that the size of the sound waves, which sets the pitch, is only relative to the diameter of the eardrum that's hearing it. So in order to match the eardrum of a fetus, I had to slow all these sounds down. And I did the same thing with the nature sounds, that I realized that if I took nature sounds and played, and I recorded them in 3D, so I have this fancy 3D setup that I can use and take it out to the woods and make these 3D recordings. And when you listen with headphones, it just sounds absolutely real. It sort of knocks your socks off, really. It's like you can hear things that you didn't actually hear when you were there. You can hear birds flying in different positions, and sort of like grass crickets you didn't even know were there. Some little trickling stream over to the side. It's all in this 3D position with your eyes closed. You listen to it with headphones, it's just like you're there. And more importantly, your physical body is tricked and fooled into thinking it's there, and the body begins to react to these sounds as if it actually is in nature. And one of the things that the body does in nature and the world at large is constantly look for rhythms in nature to time its body clocks to. So when you create an artificial world of sound and close your eyes, then those rhythms that you captured in that 3D recording, the body automatically thinks it's real and begins to adjust its internal body clocks to the rhythms of this recording. Sort of the master mode of entrainment. Nature entrains us all the time. We're actively looking to entrain to the most dominant pulse in our environment. That's the reason why binaural beats work so powerfully, because if I put sound waves that are pulsing at a brainwave speed, your body tries to time the self to that one now, because that's the most dominant pulse in your environment. So that's how brain entrainment works. But nature itself is doing that all the time. You know, crickets at night chirp at around 7 hertz. So you're being entrained at a sort of a borderline state between alpha and theta. Every kind of nature phenomenon that you can name, if you take recordings of that and bring it into the studio, you'll see that are rhythmic patterns that are present in everything. And so we're constantly being serenaded and entrained by nature at large, and we are willing dance partners that will constantly shift who we're dancing with to whoever is the most dominant pulse in our environment. Once we understand this principle, we can commandeer your body clocks and your brain waves and your state of consciousness with binaural beat and brainwave entrainment techniques, because we understand the principle of the fact that your body is looking for a dance partner, and we're going to provide one. So that means that I'm taking these nature sounds and I'm playing with their speed. So now if I take the nature sound recording in 3D and you're in training to that because you think it's real, and I start subtly slowing that recording down to half speed over 10 minutes, then all of your body clocks and your brain waves and your heart rate and your respiration, everything is going to start slowing down with the whole world that you think is real. And I eventually got a patent on that called acoustic pacing. It's a new form of brain entrainment that does not use binaural beats. And I build that into my soundtracks. And the slowed down version is what I call primordial sounds. They're, if you slow them down enough, your rational thinking mind doesn't quite recognize them anymore. And now you're activating the deep unconscious mind, which clearly participated in the creation of the universe and everything in it, and deeply recognizes these rhythmic patterns of nature, no matter what speed they are. So it's a method of using pattern recognition of nature sounds slowed to wake up a deep part of the unconscious mind, the part that we're trying to wake up in the healing process, because that's where the internal physician is. And that's the part we're trying to wake up in deep stages of high-tech meditation. So now primordial sounds become important as an adjunct feature of a soundtrack for high-tech meditation to, through pattern recognition, get the attention of big mind so it snaps awake and starts looking around. That's the purpose. That's why we're doing it. So I've got some examples of that. And this part of this was a journey for me personally, because when I made the step to sell my practice and sell my house in Virginia, I lived in a beatific place. I lived in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I had deers in my backyard, like 15 minutes from, the Skyline Drive, which is 150 miles of state park that goes through 3 states. Absolutely gorgeous there. I can't say much for the politics or the way people think there. I mean, I had a really difficult time having a conversation with anybody there except other weirdos like me. And the way you meet them is go to the health food store and you see other people who think like you do. And pretty soon you've got an underground of misfits in an environment that's not friendly to you. But that's the reason I had to leave in order to pursue these kind of crazy ideas. You can't do that there. It's too oppressive. So that's why I moved to California, where everybody's like woo-woo anyway. Like you put these crazy ideas out and people like don't even blink about it. Say, oh yeah, what's next? Go, what? So when I moved to California in 1988, I upgraded my recording studio to include the latest and the greatest that was coming out, because that was now my my job. My job was to be at the cutting edge forefront of what's happening with high-tech sound. And so in Virginia, my first recording studio, my first keyboard was the most advanced keyboard ever made. It was the first time that previous keyboards were all analog, and this was the first digital keyboard ever invented, the Yamaha DX7. I still have it. And then when I moved to Virginia, a brand new type of technology had come out in keyboards called a sampling keyboard. So I had to buy one of those. So I bought a sampling keyboard. And the sampling keyboard means that you can plug a microphone into the back of the keyboard and record any sound you want. And it will go into the processor in the computer inside the keyboard and spread that sound across the whole keyboard, right? So if I took something like a 6-inch Tibetan bowl and I rubbed that bowl and recorded it with 3D microphones and inserted that digital recording into that keyboard and assigned it to middle C on the keyboard, when I played middle C, I would play back a digital recording of this bowl at whatever tone it happens to be. C doesn't mean C anymore on the keyboard. It means the play button on a digital recorder where there's 88 play buttons, white keys and black keys. But what it does mean is that the 6-inch bowl at middle C, if I play, and I play it back and I hear that bowl, if I play C an octave lower, an octave is 1/2, the frequency. So that means when I play it back 1 octave lower, the computer inside will take that recording and play it at half speed exactly to be exactly the same note 1 octave lower. So now I'm hearing that bowl sound slowed down by half, which means I'm hearing the bowl as if I was listening to a bowl that is twice the diameter. So I start with a 6-inch bowl, and 1 octave down is a 12-inch bowl. And another octave down is a 24-inch bowl. You ever seen a 24-inch bowl? And 1 octave down is a 4-foot diameter bowl, 8-foot diameter bowl, 16-foot diameter bowl, 32-foot diameter bowl played with a tree trunk. That's what I could do with this keyboard instantaneously. Plus, any note I hit on that keyboard, whatever note it was, the computer would automatically speed up or slow down that bowl recording by the precise amount to hit that note. And so now I stood in a position to play a Tibetan bowl, symphony of bowls. And I did a test track of that at one point. And then I did nature sound recordings that I already had in 3D, cricket sounds. Now I can take a cricket sound and I can stick it on middle C, and then I can play it at half speed and have like a really big cricket, and then play an octave lower and the cricket gets bigger, and pretty soon I got a 10-foot long cricket chirping at a super slow speed. And now I've got a symphony of crickets that I can play. I did the same thing with dolphins and whales, and now I've got a whale symphony and a dolphin symphony. And I made a whole bunch of CDs based on this. So the first one I want to play here is from Brainwave Suite, and Brainwave Suite is the sound set that we have a discount on for sale at the website this week. And so this is from the Theta track of Brainwave Suite. So here we go. Trippy. So that that whole recording was 1 minute and 29 seconds long. It really takes you out of your body. The fact that nature is doing it to us all the time, every place we look and every place we go. It's lost on us because we're distracted by all the stupid details of our life that have no direct relationship to being alive at a sort of a cosmic organic level, where the mystery of nature is all around you in your face. So I kind of sort of did this same thing with, like I said, dolphin sounds and whale sounds. There was a point where I had NASA and JPL approach me with these sounds from space. And what did those sound like? They sounded like dolphins and whales and oceans and choirs singing and Tibetan bowls and crickets and birds from space, but slowed down. So I was already familiar with the slowed down sounds of these things. And when I hear it from space, I'm going, oh my God, it's all the same stuff. It's like the same blueprint. It's a fractal. And the question was, if listening to these nature sounds awakens a deeper part. So listen to, womb sounds. It awakens a personal part that made my body, that devised my body from two cells. I listen to nature sounds slowed down, and the part of me that opens up is a deeper part, a part that knows how to grow a planetary ecosystem that I grow out of. And so if that's the case, what do these space sounds that sound like the nature sounds, but coming from space, what part of my collective unconscious mind does that wake up? An ever deeper part of me that knows how to grow a solar system that the planet is grown out of, that I pop up out of. Those are the kind of things that you experience when you listen to these kind of various levels of primordial sounds that dig deeper and deeper and deeper into the big mind pattern recognition system and open ever deeper doors of perception and slapping around and waking up this deep part of you, getting us attention. So let's put headphones on again and listen to dolphins and whales loaded into the keyboard and played as instrument sounds. So many of the sounds that you were hearing there were in NASA space sound recordings from the planets that sound like dolphins and sound like ocean. So there's a lot of strange sounds in there that sound like dolphins, and some were actual dolphins, and some are all dolphins at different speeds, all mixed and matched together so you can't tell which is what. That was from an album called Celestial Dolphin. Celestial NASA sounds and dolphin sounds all mixed together in a keyboard, like instrument sounds. This period of time when I first moved to California in 1988 and opened up this big center and got a lot of cameras pointed at me, and ABC News and CNN and San Diego Magazine and all the local newspapers had full-page spreads with big pictures, and I had a huge number of people show up. It's where I met all these very famous people. I remember that's when I first met Tony Robbins, when I first met Louise Hay, when I first met a lot of those kind of people, became friends. It's a sort of perk you get when you firmly take a chance on yourself and step forward on your path and follow it. Magnificent things open up for you that couldn't have happened otherwise. And other people who've had similar experiences and have now become sort of famous and successful because they're doing their thing, recognize somebody else who's doing the same thing and show up. It was an incredible sort of period of time. And then I get this phone call from a lead scientist at TRW, who is a U.S. government contractor for NASA and JPL. And he was informing me that he had these space sound recordings from Voyager 1 and 2 and was looking for somebody to experiment with them because they seemed to be having a profound effect on the subconscious mind of people who were listening to them at TRW. And he was having experiences himself, precognitive experiences, out-of-the-body experiences, deep sort of insight, spiritual insight things happening, listening to these space sounds. And so I was given these space sounds. I'm the only person ever to have been given these space sounds, and experimented with them for years and years, and produced an 11 CD set of these NASA space sounds that's on the website under the category of NASA space sounds. So when we talk about these space sounds, we have Voyager 1 and 2 with these two 30-foot long steel poles sticking out. And in reality, what the space sounds are is an interaction between the solar wind. Here's the solar wind coming out. So the sun is off here to the left. Solar wind is the powerhouse of emissions exploding out of the sun. So the sun is a nuclear furnace that's exploding constantly, and it's so powerful it strips the atoms into the component parts, and now the charged ion particles float in this kind of a fourth state of matter called a plasma. That's the solar wind, is this charged electromagnetic explosion pressure wave coming out. And when that pressure wave hits the ionosphere and electromagnetic envelope of the planet, like Earth here, it's protected by this electromagnetic envelope and the ionosphere from the radioactive particles from the sun that would fry us. This is our shield. And so when the solar wind hits this shield, and there's ions in this shield, it's the ionosphere, right? It's the mirrored surface that bounces electromagnetic frequencies back down towards the surface of the Earth and forms the Schumann resonance, which we talked about before. So this is the other side of the Schumann resonance, which is the inside surface down to the planet and the outside surface out here interacting with the sun. These charged particle collisions, why it's called collisionless shock waves, this collision of ions that are resonating, crashing together, form shock waves that are resonating exactly within the range of human hearing, 20 to 20,000 hertz. So NASA's in a big dilemma about this because, first of all, there's no sound in space because there's no air. Not because there's no sound. It means that there's no way to transmit the sound from one place to the other. But now, according to quantum physics and the quantum nature of sound, phonons, there's the tunneling effect of phonons through a vacuum. That means that sound does travel through a vacuum because a vacuum is not a vacuum. A vacuum is dark matter, dark energy. It's a substance that's extremely subtle, but sound waves are capable of transmitting through it anyhow. It's just not at the speed that we're used to. So back to this, the fact that we've got resonating ions in every planet in the solar system resonating exactly within the range of human hearing in a vacuum where you shouldn't be able to hear anything is this weird dilemma. It's like they're going, what? How come there's sound waves in space in human hearing when there's no humans there, and humans require ears in an air atmosphere? This is weird. We've got to go investigate to find out what the heck this is. And so they engineered these special apparatus things on Voyager, which are called the plasma wave antennas. And when Voyager goes into that resonating ion field, it causes a sympathetic resonance in this steel pole. And the pole picks up the vibration like a microphone. If you had the other end of this pole against your forehead, you'd hear it through bone conduction. Similar to how Beethoven, when he went deaf, heard his last 3 symphonies. He played them on the piano with his head on the piano. A sort of similar kind of thing. So the space sounds you're hearing are resonating ions of the ionosphere interacting with the solar wind. That's pretty wild. And what do they sound like? Dolphins and whales and crickets and birds and people singing and all kinds of, crazy stuff coming from space, right? Talk about primordial sounds. This is one of my favorite soundtracks from the Space Sound series is The Rings of Uranus. Uranus is the only planet that sits on its side with its rings vertical. And this recording of The Rings of Uranus, I'm going to play it for you right now. Let's, once again, get our headphones on. This might just be me. Does that sound like Tibetan bowls to anybody? I swear that when I first got this recording and listened to it for the first time, the week before I had been screwing around with these Tibetan bowls I talked about, putting them in the keyboard and playing Tibetan bowl symphonies, where bowls were different sizes, and you take a 6-inch bowl and you play the next octave down, it sounds like a 12-inch bowl. And when it's a giant bowl of 16 feet, you have monks chanting coming out of the harmonics. It's just mind-blowing. And to hear these sounds from outer space that sound like Tibetan bowls just kind of strips all your gears, so to speak. I was kind of in a state of awe. And every time I listen to it, it does this thing to me. I mean, so that recording right there, to use that as a meditation, like you sit in meditation with headphones on with that going, wow. That's something. So I have a sample of headphones again. I have a sample of the Tibetan bowls that I talked about screwing around with. So now you can compare this rings of Uranus with the Tibetan bowls played in different speeds and stuff like that. So let's go there. Mind-blowing stuff. And so I took those initial experimentations with this new sort of discovery that I was calling Primordial Sounds, and beginning to use that in various albums. Brainwave Suite was one of the first ones, so some of the sounds you hear here are from that 4 CD set. This next section here is from Brainwave Suite, the Delta Brainwave Suite, which is taking Tibetan bowls as a musical instrument in a piece. So this lasts for another minute. Let's try that one. Also, and please forgive me for going over. I know I'm going way over. I sort of knew that was going to happen when I started assembling this together, and I just figured, okay, screw it. If you can stay, you can stay. If you can't, you can't. You can watch the rest of it on recording. But the concept that these different kinds of sounds all start to sound like each other, that in the womb sound category, mother's respiration is now slowed way down, and the inhale and the slow exhale, when you hear it, it sounds just like the ocean coming in and out. So now all of a sudden you start to understand the underpinnings of why ocean sounds are so primal and such have such a deep effect on people, because it sounds like something you spent 9 months in the womb listening to. And then when we hear the same kind of sounds, like sort of electronic ocean waves coming from space, and different types of nature sounds, like so. When I moved to California in '88, and I bought this keyboard and started screwing around with it, all kinds of things started shifting for me. The one thing that happened was my connection with the scientists from TRW endured. We became friends, and we had conversed periodically about the newest discoveries in science. And one of those discoveries in science was something called gamma ray bursts. Now, gamma ray bursts have been going around for a long time. They were mysterious bursts of light, brighter than the brightest star. As a matter of fact, the brightness level was all the stars in our entire galaxy at once. That's how bright. And these things lasted for a second or less, coming from a sort of a null place in the universe where there were no stars. And it was the biggest mystery of astrophysics at the time. And it was so mysterious that NASA created a project and launched a special gamma ray observatory into space, into orbit, called the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory, to observe these light flashes, gamma ray bursts from space, to try to find out what they were. And this scientist was the head of that project. And because of that, he's calling me up and say, hey, the newest of the new right now is they just discovered the oldest light ever measured in the whole universe, from a gamma ray burst that goes back to the first 300,000 years after the Big Bang, the oldest thing ever recorded. And he's going, and I've got it. I've got the scientific data. How would you like to translate that into sound? And I'm going, whoa, there's a project. Let's do that. So the two of us worked on this project. That's what's coming next here. So we have these gamma ray bursts coming from various places in the universe. There's something going on that explodes or implodes, and huge bursts of gamma radiation come out. And we see that, billions of years later. Most distant object in the universe spotted, GRB 090423. The fading infrared afterglow of GRB 090423 appears in the center of this false color image taken with the Gemini North Telescope in Hawaii. The burst is the farthest cosmic explosion yet seen. Astronomers have spotted the most distant object yet confirmed in the universe. Pretty cool stuff, and I've got the scientific data. Most distant object in the universe spotted. So something implodes or explodes and produces this gamma ray burst that we see millions of years later. And this is what Roland sent me, this guy from TRW. This is the GRB 099423 burst. This is its waveform. And my job was to take this waveform and convert it scientifically into sound as accurately as I could Fortunately, I've got a scientist working with me who knows everything about gamma ray bursts. And so this became a huge project that went on for months to come up with a frequency for each of these various peaks and sort of non-peaks. So where every single, every single one of these peaks ends up having a frequency that goes with it. And then we add all these frequencies together and we produce this soundtrack of the GRB was 090423. And so let's listen to that for a second. Here we go. So remember, this is the deepest, most primordial of all sounds that have ever been converted into sound. So if we're talking about what part of your unconscious mind is this tapping and awakening, it's the deepest part that you could possibly imagine getting to. A level of the collective unconscious mind that knows how to grow a universe that our galaxy is from, and that our solar system is from, and that our planet is from, and is that you pop out of. So there's definitely some kind of a rhythm in the universe going on. Everything in the universe oscillates at some frequency. So that kind of realm of primordial sounds, you can do this same extraction process of any galaxy or any nebula in the universe that you can do a spectral analysis of. That can also be converted into sound, and it opens up a whole palette of universal primordial sounds as deep meditation tools to wake up the deepest part of who we are, as part of the waking up thing that we're trying to do scientifically here. The most personal primordial sound, aside from womb sounds, would be the voice. And this is the thing that descended upon me in the midst of doing all of this primordial sound work and experimenting with it with the special keyboard. Remember, I was developing my biotuning process, which is a certain highly specific frequency accurate to a couple of decimal points that causes balance in the autonomic nervous system, the master control system that tells all systems what to do, where the entire scientific and medical community recognized that stress is the ultimate cause of disease. And the master system that manages stress is the autonomic nervous system, which also happens to be the internal physician program that tells all systems what to do. So if it's stuck in this fight or flight mode and it can't get out of it, it's not functioning correctly, and all the systems it controls are not functioning correctly. That's the cause of disease. So I had created a operational generic sound, as the sound I used in my treatments through the sound table and the sound chair that had good healing properties traditionally, right? The harmonics of a cello, the harmonics of a flute, and the harmonics of a voice all kind of mixed together in a very nice sound that I used to generate all the octaves coming through the sound table and in your headphones. But I had a revelation in the middle of all this primordial sound work that a person's voice also has a signature, that my voice sounds like me because of the vocal harmonics and overtones that spin out of my vocal cords, the tissue mass of my vocal cords. So there's a unique set of harmonics and overtones that are present in a person's voice. And the arrangement of the primary note that you sing, which is the biggest, highest amplitude, that's the fundamental note that you're singing. And all the rest of these are harmonics and overtones, exact octaves or harmonic thirds or fifths of this frequency. So these highest peaks form the fingerprint of your voice, the voice print. And it's this fingerprint that is used by law enforcement, CIA, government agencies who can identify who's on a cell phone from a satellite. Voice print analysis. You can tell precisely who's talking as long as you've got their voice print on file. Whether you have a voice print on file or not, one place that's the deepest place where your voice print is on file is in your own DNA. The primary blueprint that consciousness used to design your body out of two cells from a quantum energy field that stamped that fingerprint of harmonics and overtones in every tissue of your body, including your vocal cords, that yields this fingerprint of harmonics that gives your voice its characteristic timbre. Why my voice sounds like me is because of the harmonic overtones spinning out from the tissue match, the tissue characteristics of my vocal cords. And the tissue mass of my vocal cords is the same tissue mass as all my tissues in my whole body. It's just that when I do the spectral analysis of blowing wind across my vocal cords and I get the spectrum, this same spectrum is in every tissue of your body, not just your vocal cords. It's just that your vocal cords give us an opportunity to blow wind across and make them vibrate and analyze them on a spectrograph. And now we can see how the whole thing works. Right. So now I'm thinking that if I could have, once I found a frequency that balances the nervous system, if I could play that frequency for you and have you sing it back and record your voice singing it back with 3D microphones and stick your voice in my magic keyboard and spread your voice over all these keys and play your voice down by octaves so that you can't recognize your voice anymore, but your deep unconscious mind can, that now we have a tool to wake up the deepest part of your personal unconscious mind that designed your body out of two cells. We have a way of directly influencing and waking up the internal physician program, the part of me who knows what's wrong, what to do about it, the part of me at a deeper level that knows why I'm here and why I was created and what I'm here for to do, as the deeper sort of meditation part of biotuning in phase 3. So the very first highest peak is the fundamental tone that you're singing, and all of these are fleshing out your voice's tone, why your voice sounds like you, the timbre of your voice. All these harmonic overtone sets are the standard stuff of any recording studio spectral analysis software. I've got it myself in my studio. All based on Pythagoras and the length of the vocal cords and the strength of the wind and the characteristics of the shape of your mouth and your body densities and all the rest of it forms the timbre. of your voice and why you sound like you. So now that was used. 5 octaves of your voice. Lower down was the binaural beats. All the 5 octaves playing right into your tissue cells through the sound chair and the sound table. And the sound chair is designed is a design based on NASA. So this curve is the perfect ergonomic curve. It's the curve that they find of astronauts floating weightless in space. Your body assumes this kind of semi-seated position when your arms are a certain way by the natural tension of muscles and tendons. So that's how this chair was formed, the perfect ergonomic curve. And then when you lean the chair back so your head and knees are the same horizontal plane, that's a 0 stress point for the cardiovascular system. And then there's these big low frequency transducers built into the right left sides. So we have headphones for your body to match the configuration of headphones up here, so everything tracks together. They have a patent on that. So this concept of connecting ourselves sort of to the infinitely small and the infinitely large through octaves and harmonics and overtones, which deposit themselves directly into the formation of the structures of my own body and my own cells and my own atoms, all of it connected deeply together. Any place I enter into that sort of subconscious recognition system, it opens up the doorway to all the rest. It's a sort of a sea of vibration that's fractalized by speed, right? So you take human voices, and this is where I discovered something else, where if I take people speaking and record them and put it in my keyboard and I slow it down and speed it up, if I speed it up an octave, it sounds like Alvin the Chipmunk. If I speed it up 2 octaves, it sounds like birds. If I keep speeding it up, it sounds like crickets. If I keep speeding it up, it sounds like dolphins. And if I take cricket sounds and slow them down, they sound like birds, and birds slowed down sound like dolphins singing. It's mind-blowing. So as all of a sudden you realize that you can't talk with dolphins because you're talking at the wrong speed. So then there's a project of recording dolphins in the wild and then, slowing it down by X number of octaves so it sounds like people singing, and you learn the song and you sing it back into the water to the dolphins as they freak out because the humans are trying to communicate to them. The whole thing is part of a new technology of spirit and consciousness where we're using the science of sound and biology and the brain to unlock the secrets of the deepest states of meditation openness that we can get to by using every means at our disposal to reach sort of the no space, the present moment before I am who I think I am. And it touches my emotions. When I reach these experiences of these primordial sounds, something in my heart opens up along with my consciousness of the recognition of it. Something big puzzle piece sort of drops into place of how it all belongs in fractalized holographic time, dimension, and size. It's all large and small start to seem like each other. Sounds from space come back and sound like the nature sounds. Nature sounds sound like each other. All of it sounds like things I listened to in the womb. It sets me free. Something about all of this opens up something in me that connects me with the whole. That's the purpose. That's the idea of using these primordial sounds buried in every soundtrack I produce is sort of a trick to open this deep door. It's a hidden trick that I use that I only have shared with a few people. Now I'm sort of sharing it with as many people as possible so that we can link ourselves together in a format like this, the mind link format, which is what we're about to do now. And let me just say one word about this. Let's bring back our intention that during this next 15 minutes, when we listen to this soundtrack, that's all that we will do. Headphones, eyes closed, open yourself to being in the presence of all these other people in all kinds of different parts of the world, all simultaneous. So we're here for a purpose. The purpose is to link our minds together and go to the same state in order to make some change. Let's not get distracted by doing anything else. Let's do just this for this 15 minutes and do it all together with a purpose. And afterwards, I'm going to leave the chat and everything open so everybody can talk. So here we go. be happy and healthy and holy for this next week. It's my great honor to be with you all. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to leave the chat open for a little while as usual. So thank you. Thank you all.